It was April of 2023, right at the start of our college's spring break. I was 20 in my sophomore year, and my friends and I, 6 of us in total, decided to rent a cabin for a few days, just to unplug. No classes, no assignments, no constant phone notifications. Just music, drinks, and maybe some stories we'd laugh about for years. Our group was me, Daniel, plus 3 other guys, Evan, Kyle, and Marcus, and 2 girls, Lauren and Megan. We all been close since our freshman year. The cabin we booked was ridiculously cheap for its size. 2 stories, wraparound porch, 2 bathrooms, and supposedly private land by a lake in rural Tennessee. It was really far from anything. No towns for miles, just endless forest. The owner we spoke to on the phone had a heavy drawl and a strange way about him. He warned us, don't go too deep into the woods. Old wells, broken fences, snakes. Folks get turned around out here. We laughed it off, thinking he was just adding a little country mystery to sell the place. The drive took forever. GPS cut out almost an hour before we got there. The last stretch was nothing but narrow gravel road, the kind where 2 cars could never pass at the same time. The trees seemed to grow tighter the closer we got, the light dimming even though. It was only late afternoon when the cabin finally came into view. No one spoke for a few seconds. It didn't look like the photos. The siding was weathered, the windows filmed over with dust, and one of the shutters hung crooked, barely clinging to the hinge. There was a faint, sour smell in the air like damp wood mixed with old trash. We shrugged it off, cracked some jokes about authentic rustic charm, and unpacked. By 7 that evening, we were grilling outside, blasting music from a Bluetooth speaker, and working through the first bottles of beer. By 11, the temperature dropped, so we moved inside. That's when I noticed how unnervingly dark the woods were. Not just nighttime dark, total, suffocating black. The porch lights barely lit a few feet past the railing, and the forest seemed to press right up to the edge of the yard. No insects, no wind, just heavy silence. We crashed around 2 in the morning. My room was on the ground floor, next to the kitchen, small, just a bed and a single window facing the woods. At around 4:10 a.m. I woke up suddenly for no reason. My heart was racing like I'd been startled, though I hadn't heard anything, at least, not yet. Then came a sound, tap, tap, tap. At first, I thought it was the heater clicking, but it was too slow, too deliberate. It sounded like fingers. Turned toward the window. A man was standing there. He was pressed so close his forehead nearly touched the glass. His skin looked pale under the porch light, his hair wild and matted, his chest bare. His mouth hung open like he was breathing through it, his eyes wide, glassy, unblinking, locked onto mine. He didn't speak. He didn't move except for one hand, slowly tapping against the glass. For a moment, I couldn't move either. Then the tapping grew faster, sharper. I whispered Evan's name. He was sleeping on the couch just outside my door. He didn't hear me, so I called again, louder. He woke up, mumbled something, then came over just in time to see the man. Evan shot upright, knocking over the coffee table with a crash. The noise must have scared him off, because by the time Evan flicked on the porch light and ran outside, the man was gone. We woke everyone. The girls were visibly shaken. Kyle insisted it was just some drunk local messing around. Marcus said maybe a hunter had wandered too close. But deep down I knew he wasn't lost. He was there for us, Dot. We barricaded the doors, shoved the couch against the large front window, and took turns staying awake, Dot, the next morning. We went outside, Dot. Bare human footprints surrounded the cabin. No shoes. They stopped at every single window even. The tiny bathroom one on the second floor. We should have packed up right then. But we didn't. We were young, stubborn, and thought we could handle it. Night 2 started like before drinks, music, fire pit, but the mood was off. Lauren stuck to soda. Marcus kept his hunting knife clipped to his belt. Every few minutes, someone's eyes would drift toward the tree line. We locked every window, double-checked every door. Dot. Around 3:20 a.m. Evan got up for water. I heard him stop in the hallway and call my name. When I came out, he was pointing into the kitchen. The man was back. This time, he was inside, completely naked. His back was toward us, covered in long, red, raw-looking scratches. He stood in front of the refrigerator, staring at it like he didn't understand what it was. His body swayed slightly, like he was rocking on his feet. No one spoke. Evan slowly backed up, one by one. The rest of us gathered silently at the hall entrance. I had a pocket knife. Megan held the fire poker. Marcus gripped a broken chair leg from earlier. We hit the light switch. He was gone. The back door stood wide open, not forced, not damaged. Just open. We didn't discuss it. We just moved. In 20 minutes, we had our wallets, keys, and phones. No one bothered packing the rest. We drove through the darkness until our cell service came back, then called the sheriff. We met a deputy at a small diner off the highway. He barely seemed surprised. Anybody hurt? He asked Dot when we said no. He nodded. We've had squatters in those woods for years. Some aren't all there. We tried to explain this wasn't just a vagrant. He had been watching, circling us, and somehow got inside. The deputy just kept nodding like he'd heard it all before. When we mentioned the cabin owner, his expression shifted, almost like he knew the man. 3 days later, the rental listing vanished from every site. No trace, no explanation. We never got our deposit back, but that face, the pale skin, the unblinking eyes, the slow, deliberate tapping, I still see it sometimes. When I wake up at night, none of us have been back to Tennessee since. It happened in the late fall of 2023, when I was living alone for the first time in my life. I had just moved into a rented townhouse in central Indiana. I was 31, working a steady job, and by all technical measures an adult with my life in order. But that didn't mean the idea of living completely by myself didn't unsettle me. I had just crawled out of a messy breakup a few months prior, and I told myself that being on my own, away from constant chatter and distractions, would give me space to think. The townhouse was part of a short row of nearly identical units, plain, tidy, and quiet, tucked in at the end of a sleepy cul-de-sac that branched off a rural two-lane highway. The whole neighborhood had that bland, suburban neatness, muted siding colors, clipped hedges, little wind chimes that tinkled in the breeze, and mailboxes with last names in vinyl lettering. Most of the residents were older couples, though there were a few younger families scattered here and there. I didn't know any of my neighbors personally, and I preferred it that way, but there was one person I couldn't help noticing. He lived 3 doors down, tall, broad-shouldered, maybe mid-40s, with a patchy beard and a habit I found instantly odd. He would stand outside his house late at night, sometimes pacing, sometimes smoking, but often just standing there, staring into the street. When I pulled into my driveway after my late shifts, there he'd be, leaning on his porch railing or standing at the edge of his driveway, facing forward like he was waiting for something. He never waved, never smiled. If I looked his way, he didn't look away. He just kept watching. I tried not to overthink it. Friends and my sister told me maybe he was just an insomniac or a restless type. But there was a stillness about him that didn't feel right. He didn't shuffle his feet, didn't check his phone, didn't fidget. He could stand there, perfectly motionless, for what felt like hours. I told myself not to be paranoid. Then, the noises started. It was mid-October when I first heard it. I had gotten home from my job, warehouse inventory, sometime around 10:45 p.m. After a quick snack and a shower, I went to bed close to midnight. At exactly 2:42 a.m., I woke up to a noise that yanked me straight out of sleep, a scraping sound, metal against wood. At first, I thought it was part of a dream, but then it came again, long and slow, like a rusty gate creaking open. My bedroom was on the ground floor at the back of the unit, and a sliding glass door with vertical blinds led out to a small fenced-in backyard. I sat up, every muscle tense, and listened. A pause, then soft, deliberate crunching. Footsteps. The yard wasn't grass. It was covered in decorative stone. Every step made a crisp, unmistakable sound. These weren't animal noises. Someone was walking back there. I reached into my knitstand and grabbed the only thing I had, a dull kitchen knife I'd shoved there months ago, half as a joke. My phone was in my other hand as I crept toward the blinds, heart punching against my ribs. I peeked out. Nothing. The motion light wasn't on. Either they were out of range, or they'd come in some other way. I called 911. The dispatcher was calm, collected, asked my address, told me officers were on their way. I stayed crouched in the dark, barely breathing. 10 minutes later, the wash of red and blue lights reflected off my front window. 2 officers stood outside. I told them exactly what I'd heard, down to the minute. One walked to the backyard, while the other stayed with me. A few minutes later, the first officer came back, said the gate was shut, no sign of forced entry, No footprints, no damage. They'd write up a report. They said one of them actually muttered, "Probably a raccoon," with a look that told me they didn't believe a word of it. They left. I didn't sleep at all. In the morning, I went outside myself. That's when I noticed it. A flat rock, maybe the size of a paperback novel, wedged under the bottom of the gate. It was keeping the gate from fully closing. It was subtle, almost easy to miss. But I knew that gate. It had a heavy spring. That slammed it shut automatically. That rock wasn't there by accident. It was there to make slipping in and out silent and quick. I tossed the rock into the far corner of the yard and called the police again. They said they'd add it to the notes, but that without proof of trespassing or damage, they couldn't investigate. I asked about canvassing the neighbors or checking for cameras. They told me unless a crime had actually been committed, there was nothing to pursue. I started feeling like maybe I was losing it. 2 nights later, it happened again. This time, I woke up at 2:18 a.m. to the sound of my back door handle being tested. A soft rattle, then harder, a definite attempt. To turn it, I froze in bed, staring at the blinds. I couldn't see them, but I knew someone was right there, inches away. Then my motion light flicked on. Through the tiniest gap in the blinds, I caught a silhouette. A man. He didn't move away or run. He just stood there. I called 911 again. When the same officers showed up, they actually found large footprints in the decorative rock, leading straight up to my door. But again, no break-in, no damage, nothing to go on. They promised to patrol more often and told me to keep my doors locked. The next day, I went out and bought 2 Wi-Fi security cameras. One above the back door, one above the front. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat in the living room, lights off, phone in hand, watching the live feed. 2:18 came and went. At 2:27, the back camera's alert chimed. A tall figure in a black hoodie and gloves stepped into frame, slipping through the gate like he'd done it before. He moved carefully, avoiding the motion sensor until the last possible moment. When the light hit him, he didn't flinch. He just walked up to the door, tilted his head back, and looked straight into the camera. Then he smiled. Slow, wide, after. A moment, he stepped backward into the shadows and disappeared. I called the police, showed them the clip. They admitted it was disturbing, but said since he hadn't broken in, damaged property, or displayed a weapon, there still wasn't enough to act on. They refused to even ask the man down the street to check his doorbell footage. That night, I booked a hotel. When I returned the next afternoon to grab more clothes, I found 4 muddy handprints on the glass door, too high, too low, as if someone had crouched down, resting their hands there while looking in. I called my landlord, told him I was leaving. I broke the lease, lost my deposit, didn't care. I was out within the week. The last day I was there, I opened my mailbox. Inside was a folded piece of lined notebook paper in tiny, cramped handwriting. It read, "The cops leave, but I don't." The officer I handed it to that day didn't roll his eyes. He actually looked uneasy. Said they'd do a wellness check on the area. But I was gone. A month later, I got a Facebook message from a woman named Megan. "Hi," she wrote. "Sorry to bother you." I think you used to live here. Did you ever have someone in a black hoodie hanging around the backyard? I keep hearing footsteps at night. Last night, someone knocked on the glass door around 2 a.m. and just stood there. I stared at the screen. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. I didn't reply. I didn't want to know.